The Windsor Castle corridor was silent except for the soft echo of polished boots on marble. Thomas Graves had walked this hallway 1,000 times. As a royal guard with 12 years of service, he knew every painting, every shadow, every sound that belonged. But tonight, something was different. It was just past midnight when he heard it. A voice low and breaking. Coming from the king's private study, Thomas paused mid-step. The door was slightly open. A sliver of golden light spilled onto the floor. He should have kept walking. Protocol was clear. But the tone of that voice stopped him cold. It wasn't anger. It wasn't command. It was something he'd never heard from King Charles before. It was pain. Before you hear what happened next. If you love true emotional stories that reveal what really happens behind closed doors, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what comes next. Thomas moved closer, not to eavesdrop, but to ensure everything was safe. That was his duty. Through the gap, he could see the king standing by the window, his back to the room. His shoulders were slumped in a way that no public photograph had ever captured. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," Charles said quietly. Thomas froze. There was someone else in the room. He adjusted his position slightly and saw her. Queen Camilla sat in a chair near the fireplace, her hands folded in her lap. Her face was unreadable. "You've managed before," she replied. Her voice was steady, almost cold. "That was before," Charles said. He turned to face her. Even from a distance, Thomas could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Before I realized how different we've become." Camilla stood slowly. "Different. Charles, we've always been different. That's never been the problem. Then what is?" His voice rose slightly, then fell again. "What is the problem, Camilla?" "Because I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Thomas felt his chest tighten. He shouldn't be hearing this. But he couldn't move. This wasn't just a royal disagreement. This was something deeper. Something real. "You're tired," Camilla said, moving toward the door. "You're under pressure." "We all are." "Don't do that," Charles said quietly. "Don't reduce what I'm feeling to exhaustion." She stopped at the door. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Camilla turned back to him. "What do you want me to say, Charles?" "I want you to tell me the truth," he said. "I want you to tell me if you're still here because you want to be or because you have to be." The question hung in the air like smoke. Thomas held his breath. Camilla's expression flickered. Just for a second. Then the mask returned. "I'm here because I'm your wife. That's all that matters." "That's not an answer," Charles said, but she was already gone. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Charles stood alone in the study. He lowered his head, pressing his fingers against his temples. Thomas saw something he never thought he'd see. The King of England looked utterly, completely lost. Thomas stepped back into the shadows and continued his patrol. But his mind was racing. What had he just witnessed? And why did it feel like the beginning of something much bigger? 3 days passed before Thomas saw them together again. It was during a private dinner in the state dining room, a rare evening without guests or cameras. Thomas was stationed near the entrance. As still as the portraits on the walls, the king and queen sat at opposite ends of the long table. The distance between them wasn't just physical. Charles picked at his food, barely eating. Camilla made polite conversation with one of the household staff about the menu for an upcoming event. Her tone was pleasant, professional, but there was no warmth in it, no connection. When the staff member left, silence filled the room. "You haven't touched your dinner," Camilla said, without looking up. "I'm not hungry," Charles replied. "You need to eat. You have 3 events tomorrow. I'm aware of my schedule." Another silence. Longer this time. Thomas kept his eyes forward, but he was listening to every word. "We can't keep doing this," Charles said finally. Camilla set down her fork. "Doing what?" "Pretending." His voice was quiet but firm. "Sitting in the same room and pretending we're still something." "We are something, Charles. We're the King and Queen of England." She looked at him now, her gaze sharp. "That's not pretending. That's reality." "That's duty," he corrected. "That's not the same thing." Camilla stood abruptly. Her chair scraped against the floor. "Duty is what we signed up for. Duty is what holds everything together. If you've forgotten that, then maybe you need to remember why you're sitting in that chair. Charles stood as well. For a moment, they faced each other across the long table like two generals across a battlefield. I remember perfectly, Charles said. I remember everything, including the promises we made to each other. Promises that had nothing to do with crowns or titles. Promises change, Camilla said coldly. People change. Circumstances change. Is that what happened? Charles asked. Did you change? Or did you just stop caring? Camilla's jaw tightened. You have no idea what I've sacrificed. Then tell me. Charles's voice echoed off the walls. Tell me what you've sacrificed, because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm the only one trying to hold this together. The words hung heavy in the air. Thomas felt the tension like electricity before a storm. Camilla's face was stone. I've given you everything you asked for. I stood by you when the world hated me. I took every insult, every cruel headline, every comparison to her. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. I became what you needed me to be. And now you stand there and tell me I'm not trying? Charles's anger seemed to drain away. His shoulders sagged. I'm not saying that. Then what are you saying? He looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was almost a whisper. I'm saying I don't know if we can survive this. I don't know if I want to. The words hit like a hammer. Thomas saw Camilla's expression crack, just for a second. Then she turned away. Good night, Charles, she said quietly, and walked out. The king stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by empty chairs and cold food. He didn't move for a long time. Thomas had guarded many secrets in his years of service. But this one felt different. This one felt like watching something irreversible unfold. A week later, Thomas was assigned to the king's detail for a private visit to Highgrove House, Charles's personal residence in Gloucestershire. It was supposed to be a weekend of rest, a break from the pressure of Windsor and London, but rest wasn't what Charles found there. Thomas noticed it immediately when they arrived. The king walked through the gardens alone, hands clasped behind his back, eyes distant. He stopped at a bench overlooking the rose garden. This was the place where he'd spent so many hours over the years, finding peace in the soil and the seasons. Today, there was no peace in his face. Thomas maintained his distance, but he watched. It was his job to watch. That's what he told himself anyway. Charles sat on the bench for nearly an hour. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at the roses. Then his phone rang. Charles looked at the screen. His expression shifted, something between hope and dread. He answered, hello. Pause. No, I'm at Highgrove. Another pause, longer this time. I thought you were coming. Thomas couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could read the king's face. It told him everything. I see, Charles said quietly. Another engagement. Of course, his voice was flat. No, I understand. Duty calls. It always does. He ended the call and sat motionless. Then slowly, he lowered his head into his hands. Thomas felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen the king face hostile crowds, political crises, and the weight of impossible decisions. But he'd never seen him look this defeated. That evening, Thomas was stationed outside the library when he heard Charles on the phone again. This time, the conversation was different. William, I need to talk to you about something. A long pause. No, not over the phone. Can you come to Highgrove tomorrow? Just you. Whatever William said made Charles close his eyes. Thank you. I appreciate it. The next afternoon, Prince William arrived. Thomas escorted him to the library where Charles was waiting. The door closed behind them. Thomas took his post outside. But the walls were old, and the door wasn't quite flush with the frame. Sound traveled. You look terrible, William said bluntly. I feel worse, Charles replied. There was the sound of glasses clinking. Whiskey, probably. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who would understand. Understand what? A long silence. Then Charles spoke, and his voice was raw. I think my marriage is over. Thomas heard William exhale sharply. Dad, what are you talking about? Camilla and I, We're not working anymore. We haven't been for a while. I've tried to ignore it, tried to push through like I always do, but I can't anymore. I can't live like this. What happened? William asked carefully. Nothing happened, Charles said. That's the problem. Nothing happens. We exist in the same spaces. We fulfill the same duties, but we're not ... together. Not really. We're two people playing roles. And I'm tired, William. I'm so tired of pretending. Does she know you feel this way? I've tried to talk to her. She shuts down. Or she turns it into a conversation about duty and responsibility, as if I don't already carry enough of that. William was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I don't know, Charles admitted. I don't know if there's anything I can do. We're not like other people. We can't just ... separate. The crown doesn't allow for that kind of weakness. It's not weakness to admit something isn't working, isn't it? Charles's voice was bitter. After everything it took to get here, after what I put everyone through to be with her, those words hung heavy. Thomas knew what they meant. Everyone did. William spoke carefully. You can't stay in something that's destroying you. Not even for the crown. I don't know what it is anymore, Charles said quietly. I don't know if we're destroying each other or if we've just run out of reasons to stay. Outside the door, Thomas stood perfectly still. He'd heard royal secrets before, but this was different. This was a fracture at the very heart of the monarchy, and it was only getting wider. The following week, Thomas noticed something new. Camilla was gone more often. Official visits, charitable engagements, events that took her away from Windsor for days at a time. When she was present, she moved through the palace like a ghost. Polite, efficient, untouchable. Charles withdrew into his work. He took meetings late into the night, reviewed documents until his eyes grew red and barely slept. The staff whispered about his mood. Not angry, they said. Just absent. Like part of him had left the building. It was during one of these long nights that Thomas saw something that changed everything. He was on late patrol. Walking the ground floor corridors at 2 a.m, most of the palace was dark, but light still glowed from beneath the door of the king's study. Thomas approached quietly, intending to check that everything was secure. Then he heard the voice. It wasn't Charles. It was Camilla. I know what you're thinking, she said. Her voice was different than usual, softer, almost vulnerable. You're thinking about how to end this, how to do it quietly, how to protect the institution. That's not Charles began, but she cut him off. Don't lie to me. Not now, not after everything. There was a pause. I can feel you pulling away. I felt it for months. Maybe longer? Then why didn't you say something? Charles asked. His voice was tired. Because I was hoping I was wrong. Camilla laughed, but there was no humor in it. Foolish, isn't it? After all these years, I'm still hoping for things that won't come. It's not foolish. Yes, it is. Her voice hardened. And it's time we both stopped pretending. You want out, Charles? You've wanted out for a while. You're just too much of a gentleman to say it. That's not fair. Fair. Camilla's voice rose. When has any of this been fair? When was it fair that we had to wait decades? Fair that we had to endure the hatred and the judgment? Fair that we finally got what we wanted, and it turned out to be. She stopped. This Thomas heard movement. Footsteps across the room. What happened to us? Charles asked quietly. We fought so hard to be together, and now that we are, we've discovered that fighting for something and living with it are two very different things, Camilla finished. Maybe we were always better as the forbidden thing. The secret. The escape. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Her voice was cold again. We were the affair, Charles. We were the passion in the margins. We were never meant to be the main story. You don't mean that, don't I? Camilla challenged. Look at us. Really look. We're strangers who share a title. We're business partners in the family firm. But we're not. We're not what we were. Silence filled the room. Long and heavy. I don't know how to fix this, Charles said finally. His voice was broken. Maybe you can't, Camilla replied. Maybe some things are just ... done. Thomas heard her walk toward the door. He stepped back quickly, moving out of sight. Camilla emerged, her face composed but her eyes red. She walked past without seeing him, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Thomas waited a full minute before he glanced toward the study. Through the gap in the door, he could see Charles standing by the window again. Same position as that first night? But this time, something was different. This time, he looked like a man who'd made a decision. The rumor started small. A whisper among the household staff. A comment from a lady in waiting. Then it grew. The king and queen were barely speaking. Thomas heard it from everywhere. The kitchen staff noticed they requested meals at different times. The secretaries saw their schedules diverge, with fewer and fewer shared commitments. The drivers reported separate. Cars to the same events, but it was the small things that told the real story. Charles stopped wearing his wedding ring during private time. Thomas noticed it on the dresser in the king's bedroom one morning. By evening, it was back on his finger. A performance. A costume piece. Camilla spent more time at Ray Mill House, her private residence in Wiltshire. When she was at Windsor, she kept to her own apartments. The connecting door between their private quarters remained closed. They still appeared together in public. Still smiled for the cameras. Still played their parts with the precision of seasoned actors. But behind the scenes, the distance grew. Then came the night that confirmed everything. Thomas was assigned to night duty at Windsor. It was quiet, routine. Until he heard raised voices coming from the Queen's sitting room. He moved closer. Not to intrude, but because loud voices in the palace at midnight usually meant something was wrong. You can't just announce something like that. Camilla's voice was sharp. I'm not announcing anything, Charles replied. I'm simply making arrangements. Arrangements? She laughed bitterly. You're moving your schedule around so we're never in the same place at the same time. You're systematically separating our lives. And you think no one will notice? I think we've been noticed for months, Charles said quietly. The staff knows. The security knows. Probably half of London knows by now. We're fooling no one. So your solution is to make it official? My solution is to stop torturing both of us. His voice was firm. We can't live like this, Camilla. It's not fair to you, and it's certainly not fair to me. Fair? Camilla's voice cracked. You want to talk about fair? I gave up everything for you. I endured decades of public hatred. I stood by you when your own family turned their backs. And now when things get difficult, you want to just walk away? I'm not walking away from my responsibilities. No. Just from me. The silence was devastating. That's not what I'm doing, Charles said. But his voice lacked conviction. Then what are you doing? Camilla demanded. Explain it to me. Make me understand why, after everything we've been through, you're giving up now. I'm not giving up, Charles said. I'm accepting reality. We're not the same people we were. What we had. It belonged to a different time. A different version of us. So that's it? Camilla's voice was barely a whisper now. That's all it was? A different version? Don't twist my words. I'm not twisting anything. I'm hearing you clearly for the first time in months. There was a rustling sound. Movement. You want space? Fine, you want separation? I'll give it to you. But don't pretend this is for both of us. This is for you. This has always been for you, Camilla. No, her voice was steel. I'm done. I'm done fighting for something you've already let go of. I'm done being the villain in your story of regret. The door opened suddenly. Thomas barely had time to step back. Camilla emerged, her face a mask of controlled fury. She saw him, but said nothing, just swept past like a queen going into battle. Inside the sitting room, Charles stood frozen. His face was gray. His hands trembled slightly. Thomas had seen many things in his years of service. Celebrations and tragedies. Moments of triumph and disaster, but he'd never seen this. He'd never seen a king look so utterly defeated by his own choices. 1 month later, the announcement came. Not publicly. Not yet. But through the palace, the news spread like wildfire. The king and queen would be maintaining separate residences. Official duties would continue. Public appearances would be coordinated. But the private life they'd shared was over. Thomas was in the corridor. When he saw Charles leave his study for the last time that day, the king looked older somehow, thinner. The weight of the crown had always been visible, but now there was something else. Something heavier than duty. "Regret, Your Majesty," Thomas said, bowing slightly. Charles stopped. For a moment, he looked at Thomas as if really seeing him for the first time. "Graves, isn't it?" "Thomas Graves." "Yes, sir." Charles nodded slowly. "You've been here a long time. You've seen quite a lot, I imagine." Thomas kept his expression neutral. "I see what I'm meant to see, sir." A small, sad smile crossed Charles's face. Diplomatic answer. "You'd make a good politician." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Off the record, as it were." "Of course, sir." Charles hesitated, then asked quietly, "Do you think it's possible to fight for something your whole life, finally achieve it, and then realize it's not what you wanted after all?" The question hung in the air. Thomas knew this wasn't really about an answer. It was about confession, about acknowledgement. "I think," Sir Thomas said carefully, "that sometimes we fight so hard to reach the destination that we forget to ask if it's still where we want to go." Charles looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Wise words. He turned to leave, then stopped. "Thank you, Graves, for your service and for your discretion." "Always, sir." Charles walked away, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Thomas watched him go, thinking about all the nights he'd witnessed, all the conversations he'd overheard, all the pain he'd seen behind closed doors. The public would never know the full story. They'd see carefully worded statements and official explanations. They'd speculate and gossip and take sides. But Thomas knew the truth. He'd seen it unfold night after night. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes history weighs too much. Sometimes two people can fight the whole world to be together, only to discover they were fighting for a dream that couldn't survive reality. King Guy, Charles, and Queen Camilla would continue their duties. They would smile at ceremonies and wave at crowds. They would maintain the illusion that everything was fine. But Thomas knew better. He'd seen the moment the fairy tale ended. He'd heard the conversations that revealed the truth. He'd witnessed the slow, painful collapse of something that was supposed to last forever. That's the thing about royal marriages, he thought. Everyone sees the crown. No one sees the weight as he resumed his patrol through the silent corridors of Windsor Castle. Thomas carried the secret with him, not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a reminder that behind every title, beneath every crown, lived real people with real pain. And sometimes, even a king couldn't fix what was broken. The palace slept around him, full of history and secrets. Thomas walked his rounds, a silent guardian of stories that would never be told. But he would remember. He would always remember the night he heard a king admit he was lost, and a queen realized she'd been fighting alone all along. Some truths change everything, and some truths stay buried in the walls of palaces, known only to those who walk the corridors in the dark.